Hello, and welcome to Startup Voice with Efimchik. We're going to be talking today with Andrey Zamovskiy of Ambisafe about a very hot topic of the day, initial coin offerings. Andrey has a lot of expertise and a deep background in this area, and that's the first thing he's going to tell us about.
One of the first cryptocurrency engineers in the world that existed, multiple companies in this space. The last one was specializing on licensing white label blockchain token wallet software, and we happened to have the product that was the best fit for launching an ICO. And at the end of last year, this is why we got the highest demand for the software, so we kept advancing it towards the ICO project requirements. So now I think we have the widest set of blockchain financial market services that a typical company needs. It includes token issuance services and other blockchain-based securities services, I'd say, like scripts to pay dividends, conduct voting, white label wallet software, APIs for the exchanges. We provide services like writing white papers, blockchain architecture. I think it's actually a new kind of investment banking for this emerging blockchain-based capital markets. Yeah, okay. Sure, this is it.
So I think you've qualified yourself. You have some knowledge in this area. So for our viewers, can you just for people who are kind of coming up on this their first time, what is an initial coin offering? Just kind of in a few words, right? Not my whole history of the blockchain, but what is it? It's really hot right now.
Initial coin offering is a new type of crowdfunding where companies sell their blockchain-based shares or other forms of financial instruments that they invent in exchange for cryptocurrency. It is much more efficient than the way it's been done before because of the speed of transactions, cost of those transactions, and globalization of the market.
Okay, and so there are two types of tokens or coins that you can sell. One is the utility token, right? Mm-hmm. And the other one is?
Well, the other one is security token.
Security token.
I think long term, most of them will be security tokens.
Really? Okay.
So blockchain has removed borders in financial markets. Until like a couple of years ago, to have your shares traded on multiple exchanges in the world, you would have to go through the IPO process in some one country, then do cross-listing on an exchange in another country, and in this way you could have got to two countries, and the process could have costed millions of dollars by then. Now you can issue shares of your company in the blockchain at as low as $1 if you have enough technical skills, and have them listed on like 10 plus cryptocurrency exchanges worldwide in a matter of days for like up to 10K budget. Blockchain has simplified a lot of things.
Okay, well, so I think you're making it sound very easy, but I think it's actually a lot more complex than that, right? To sort of get, the reason this is a hot topic is because you see all these news articles about companies that aren't that far along that are raising 10, 20, $30 million, and you probably can't do that on a $10,000 budget.
Yeah, it costs more. But why it's happening? Okay, blockchain has opened access to financial markets, both for companies and for investors. Typical problem that companies had before blockchain, that they couldn't reach to the investors who understood their projects. Like if you are based somewhere in Argentina or Ukraine, it would be very difficult to find blockchain educated investors or some highly specialized, some investors who understand your field. It doesn't have to be blockchain, it can be some quantum physics or anything else. The investors who can understand and evaluate your project properly may simply not exist in the market where you are. Now, because internet has become the place to issue shares thanks to the blockchain, you can reach out to the global market of investors that are looking for projects at ICO listing websites. So you are no longer limited by geography of your country or jurisdiction.
Okay.
So
that brings up a really interesting question. So who are these investors? Who are these people who are investing in ICOs? Where are they located? What kind of diligence are they doing on these companies? Because normally when you have a VC investor, it's quite an arduous process to get through their business diligence, their legal diligence. They look through every piece of paper, their lawyers do, their accountants do. Doesn't seem like that's really happening here. So how is it that these investors, are they investing really small amounts that they don't really care? Or how is it that they're getting the level of comfort to invest in these companies on the blockchain?
There are multiple things that are happening with this market currently. So the initial group of investors were people who made a lot of money on buying Bitcoin early, and they were looking to repeat this success by investing in the new coins that were being launched. Later, when their neighbors saw what's happening, the level of education of investors and the level of their education about blockchain awareness, about cryptocurrencies and so on started to go lower and lower. So now it's not so initially it was investors, it was like high risk, high tech investors who were like crazy enough to invest in anonymous distributed financial system operated by a group of anonymous hackers worldwide. It's like high risk by definition. And they were investing into this without any paperwork. A lot of it was based on trust and cryptography. And now this group is joined by a lot of other people. So because blockchain enabled access to financial market, let's say there are some VC funds in Silicon Valley that are currently planning to launch to raise their some VCs in Silicon Valley who are planning to raise their next fund through the ICO, and they will be selling on blockchain shares. So now people who have bought Bitcoin on a local exchange in Argentina, for example, or in Africa can invest in the next fund like Sequoia or Andreessen or whoever it will be that will launch their ICO with the amount as little as $1. Before ICO concept, investors had to travel to SF Bay Area to get an opportunity to meet the people, the local VCs, to get the opportunity to co-invest with them. Now it doesn't matter where you are based, you can participate in all the crowdfunding campaigns that are happening. So this market is getting filled with more and more investors who are starting to who are getting educated about blockchain. In a lot of another thing that is happening, cryptocurrency exchanges, local cryptocurrency exchanges in different countries are becoming the first, the place to make the first investment that people make in their life. Until Bitcoin, like before Bitcoin, people would normally invest in some companies, try buying some shares or some, I don't know, local projects.
Public exchanges, right? Like Microsoft shares, Apple shares, right?
Yeah, or something less interesting, because normally they don't have access to that big exchanges where Apple was traded. Now, once everyone heard about Bitcoin, a lot of people are trying, and people saw the success of Bitcoin, they're trying to buy cryptocurrency first. So cryptocurrency is becoming the first typical investment in most of the countries outside of the US. And now, because those exchanges are getting filled with the stocks of real companies who decided to issue their stocks on the blockchain, those local exchanges becoming kind of gateways to local economies of this global fundraising campaigns.
Okay, so you have investors from all over the world. It sounds like, from what you're saying, these are not necessarily sophisticated investors. These
Right.
are people who are investing for the first time in their lives. They're trying this out. Presumably they're not investing large amounts, right? You're saying.
Yeah, so the original Bitcoin investors, early Bitcoin buyers tend to invest large amounts because they made like millions from something around $100 sometimes. and they're looking to repeat the success, so they're throwing much bigger amounts of money. But the typical investment ranges from $100 to $1,000 for most of the ICOs. $100 to $1,000. Yeah.
Okay, so you need a lot of really small investors to get to those
so
figures that.
Normally, the number of participants in ICO campaign is between 3,000 and 20,000. Some of them are driving much more traffic to their websites because it's a paid traffic, but the organic, I would say, is somewhere around 10,000 participants per campaign.
Okay. And so you've been involved in ICOs for about a year, it sounds like, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many have you done now?
4, 5, 6.
Six.
Some of them were successful, some of them were not. We had 4 successful and 2 not successful.
And what's not a successful ICO? Because I think a lot of people right now think that, well, as long as you say I'm going to do it, then you're going to raise, $30 million.
Yeah, so not successful are the ones who haven't raised their minimal amount. So normally ICO sets a threshold somewhere around like $1 million that when it's not reached, the company distributes the money back to the investors.
Okay, and can you talk about the ones that weren't successful? Why weren't they able to reach their threshold?
Yeah, it normally related to communication issues between the founding team and the investors. People underestimate the level of engagement that is required to launch the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be online like 24/7, and those investors expect you to answer any kind of dumb questions within less than an hour, regardless.
Even
of
if
the
they're
time.
investing $100.
Yeah.
But you still think this is easier than venture capital or some other form of investment where you could get a single check from a single investor?
In terms of efforts that needs to be put in the campaign, I don't think it's easier, but it's like more guaranteed if you do everything right.
Okay. Well, actually, this brings us to a very good question. We're going to talk about doing everything right. And to keep this kind of fun, I wanted to do a hypothetical, right? Let's say we're starting to work together with Ambisafe, and let's say we have a company which is an Uber on the blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so everybody can understand what that is, right? So it's same concept as Uber. We're going to have drivers. We're going to pay them. We're going to issue this new currency. These tokens
that will represent revenue share of the company.
Well, so, and I guess that's the 2 different routes, right? So if I was coming in to do this as a founder of this company, I might say, well, should we go the route of it's going to represent equity in the company, or should we go the route of this just represents the way that you pay drivers, so it's a utility token? And maybe that's sort of the first question we'd address. And then I actually was hoping you'd kind of walk me through, so it's maybe a 3-4 months process to an ICO from engagement. Mm-hmm. So kind of talk us through what happens.
Okay, so ICO is basically a simplified version of an IPO. If IPO normally happens as the last round of financing, somewhere after Series D, ICO happens either as the first round of financing or second, third at most. Normally it's a replacement for Series A when company is able to get like several $100K from angel investors. Now they're getting angel investments to launch the ICO. So what happens? There is a somewhat standard form of the information that is expected by cryptocurrency community. It's an extended version of typical 10-slide deck, more interactive. So you would normally guide company through putting all this information together. Sometimes for technical companies that invent some new technology, new blockchain or something like highly technical, it's normally a white paper. For
my Uber business, what is it?
It depends on the strategy that you take. Whether it's a utility token or revenue share. I think long term, more and more companies will be admitting that this is a security, what they sell is shares, this is more straightforward for everyone, and it will be a share on the blockchain. So in this case, you would write sort of prospectuses with the description of the business plan, and all the projections, a description of equity structure, your plan on paying out dividends and so on.
And can I do all this in the US?
Yes, it is possible to do everything according to the law, so the law doesn't need to be changed in order to do a fully legal ICO. Okay, so most of the efforts normally go into preparation of the documents and presentation materials, because this is where a company has to finalize what exactly they are doing, and it takes a lot of brainstorming sessions between founders of the company and lawyers and ICO agency that is helping them to figure out what exactly we are going to offer to this market, because some of the fairly valid business ideas are not, this market is not ready to invest in everything, so sometimes company has to adjust the business model of the project to make it more blockchain oriented.
So are ICOs, are they only for blockchain companies? Are they primarily for blockchain companies? Okay.
And this is how we are different from others, that we are trying to pick companies who are doing non-blockchain projects. So I think because of the blockchain efficiency, it's 1,000 times faster and cheaper technically, and just more efficient than conventional infrastructure of financial market. It's eventually going to replace all the old infrastructure, so all the shares of all the companies in 5 to 10 years will be issued on some variations of the blockchain databases. So it doesn't have to be blockchain project. It just, the community currently mainly consists of people who expect blockchain projects, because those investors who are looking for something innovative to invest in, because they coming in through cryptocurrency exchanges that advertise Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, are expecting it to be somehow related to the blockchain.
So it's easier to fund them, basically. It's easier to get investor interest.
Right, but as the exchanges will get more and more normal investors who are interested in any highly profitable company rather than blockchain company, the requirement is to be a blockchain related will no longer be the case. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so we're stick with the example, because I think there's a lot of information online about the risks of doing ICOs and the pros of doing ICOs, and just about anything you could want to know, except to how to actually do one. What are the steps? So
the first step is to prepare all the documentation.
And the documentation is this white paper or the technical spec?
It's a white paper and presentation in a form of website, one-pager website with 10 slides with some animations.
Do I have to have a company when I do this?
Yes.
Can it be a US company?
For liability purposes, it's better to do it as a company than...
So I have a company. Can this be a US company?
Yeah, it can be a US company.
Not like a Singaporean company?
Yeah, you can, for example, file under for an exemption S, exemption S.
Right, that allows, is for the foreign
it
investors.
allows US company to sell securities outside of the US. In this way, you can do it completely legally everywhere where it's...
Right, to non-US investors only. But so I heard something about companies wanting to go to US investors first and get almost like anchor investors, and then the other investors would kind of rally behind those anchor investors.
Yeah, so
is that true? Is that not true?
What makes ICO campaign more successful is when people see that it's getting a lot of money on the day one, ideally, first hour of the ICO, and then people having this fear of missing out. So this is why everyone is trying to get as many anchor investors as possible.
So anchor investors are basically like your private placement. You go to people individually, to your contacts.
You basically guarantee them that they will get into this round, in most cases with some discount for committing the money before the start of the campaign. It's a bit... it's negotiated in custom ways for every project. There are a lot of nuances there.
Okay.
So this is something that needs to be regulated, I think.
Okay. So we formed a company. We're making this one-page website. We're working on this white paper, maybe a prospectus. We're figuring out what the rights of the token holders will be, whether it's
Yeah.
securities rights, whether it's just an internal currency that we use to pay our drivers.
Then you need to announce, once the landing page is published, once the website about the ICO is published, you need to announce the date. You need to put a counter on the website to announce the date when the ICO starts. And once it's published, this is the official start of your PR and marketing campaign. Now it's time to go to like all the friends, investors around and talk about your ICO. Normally companies go to multiple conferences, like 5-ish. Talk to all the investors about their ICO, updating their presentation materials as they get questions about some areas that they didn't cover properly. And normally within month and a half of active PR of your project, you will get a sufficient group of anchor investors, and when the countdown is at 0, ICO starts, and if you've done everything well, people send you a lot of money.
And so, okay, they send you money. Where does this money go?
There are multiple options. So most of the investments are currently come in form of either Bitcoin or Ether, which is cryptocurrencies. Around 10% of the investments are coming in form of fiat money through wire transfers. If you have found a bank that is ready to process a lot of incoming transactions for a fresh account from all around the world. Some companies...
So basically, if you're a US company, you could have a legitimate bank account that will accept wire transfers. Will it accept Bitcoins?
No, banks don't accept
So
Bitcoin.
you'd have to have basically an account with like you guys, right?
Yeah.
With Ambisafe. Ambisafe will set up
Yeah,
an
Ambisafe
account,
will set up the infrastructure that is required to accept cryptocurrency payments.
and then you can feed those into a bank account, like into a real one.
So so the ICO round normally lasts, the campaign itself normally lasts between several hours and a month. So in most cases, if you are
Until you're
successful,
sold out, right?
yeah, you will announce that the fundraising will go for a month, and if you are lucky, you are sold out within the first hour. If you are not, it will last for a month. So you'll get the company will get somewhere between like a couple and 200 millions in cryptocurrency that will normally be stored on an escrow account. Multisig wallet. Multisig is a cryptocurrency, special cryptocurrency account that requires multiple signatories to send the money. It's normally people with some reputation that guarantee that you will not run away with the money, that will do audit of your milestone deliveries and so on. So in half of the cases, you will get portions of money released as you achieve the milestones. If it's some like big open source project, like a new blockchain.
Okay.
If it's more conventional fundraising, like a company raises money to develop a new drug, for example, they will need the money on a bank account to pay lawyers to apply for licenses and so on. Then the company would normally convert cryptocurrency to fiat, like US dollars, using one of the cryptocurrency exchanges.
And is that still through you guys, or is that somewhere else? Like, so
We have launched our own exchange. It doesn't have high volume yet. We are working on that, but there are multiple options there.
Okay, so it's possible to take this sort of funny money and convert it into real money.
It's funny money is a real money.
Okay. Well, I think we're getting to that, right? We're getting to that point where it's becoming more traditional, but still for a lot of people, it's like for me, like I wouldn't know what to do with it. Right?
Cryptocurrency is a new form of money. The other forms are cash, money in a banking system. There are other like form of layers, but cryptocurrency is a new form of money that exists in this distributed network. I think central banks should be the ultimate issuer of the cryptocurrency, and then
the ultimate issuer. But isn't the issuer like each company is now its own issuer of cryptocurrency? That's what
the company
tokens
issues tokens, and it's up. So the token is just a number in a spreadsheet. Basically, it's up to you to decide what are your promises beyond this number. It can be a share, it can be a currency, it can be
Okay. Yeah. that makes sense. So let's talk about some of the risks now, because you're saying, well, we can do it in the U.S., we can do it under current U.S. laws. So are you working on the premise now that you're selling to non-U.S. investors only, or you're selling to U.S. investors under 506C in the sort of you're doing kind of a public placement, but you're pre-filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. They're telling them you're going to do this, and then you have to make sure all the accredited investors are...
So there is no standard answer for a project. There is a tree of choices that you have to make. If it's a utility token, the only thing you need basically is a legal opinion of your counsel with argumentation why is it not a security. So
but that's the big risk, right? Whether that's going to stand up to anything in the future.
Yeah, it's a risk, but if it's a utility token, this is the best you can do. Like to have lawyers analyze all the properties of the instrument that is being issued and describe why is it not a security, because you won't get a confirmation from FCC that it's not a security within meaningful time frame.
Right. I mean, it seems like the SECs are leaning towards everything as a security, so stop playing games with us, right? That's the guidance from the SEC.
No, they say that most of the tokens can be a security, and I agree with them, because a lot of projects are trying to present it as a utility token to not spend efforts on the compliance, which is a shortcut, as we understand. If you admit that your token is a security, then you can decide whether you are going to file under some exemption or S3 and go through the whole thing of IPO, or you can just exclude US as a jurisdiction, so you are not touching US investors.
Are you able to do that with some level of certainty that you're not touching U.S. investors? That
Yes.
No U.S. investors, even though there's a kind of a disconnect between real life and how people use their computers, they're using proxies or whatever.
Yeah, you have to put some efforts into preventing U.S. investors from accessing the crowd sale. It's not enough to say that the access for the U.S. investors is denied. You actually have to ask them where they're from, their country during the sign-up process. You need to have sign-up process. Most of the ICOs, they just raise money directly to the contract. We don't do that. So you have to put in place some measures of verification that they're non-US investors.
Okay. We're talking about some of the risks associated with doing an ICO. And what I'm hearing, and what the internet is abuzz about, is that we know that there's a lot of unknowns, right?
I mean, you can guess a lot of those unknowns. So
you can guess them, but not the outcome, right?
So as the market gets bigger, there are more and more consumer protection needed. The initial ICOs, they were pretty close to private fundraising, because the people knew, most of the investors who would invest in person. Now, as you're getting more and more people with all sorts of expectations from around the world, you need to care about their protection more and more. You need to be preparing more and more documents to make it clear, what to expect from you as a company and the token. So the regulation will be getting more and more complex as the market will grow.
And I actually saw some article that Singapore as well is starting to kind of tighten up its regulation, which was the sort of go-to place for a lot of ICOs.
Yeah, so Singapore was go-to place because at some point the government has announced that we are not going to regulate anything blockchain related, and everyone rushed into incorporating.
And now they're like, haha, gotcha.
So now they realize that
they should regulate it.
That the volume of money is pretty high, and they've decided to issue at least some guidance.
I only saw that they said basically stay tuned, we'll issue some guidance. Was there anything else since then? Have they actually issued actual guidance?
No, they released similar warning to what FCC had.
SEC, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, given what's happened kind of in the US and in Singapore, are you seeing any shift in how people are doing their ICOs? Are they doing them more in one jurisdiction or another? I know that there's some very complicated schemes where there's 3-4 different companies involved in the project. I mean, is that necessary? Why are people doing that?
Yeah, so to understand like how fresh this market is, most of the ICOs that has I'd say 80 to 90% of ICOs that has happened last year and have raised like total 200 millions didn't have any legal link between the token and the company. It was based purely on reputation. Mm-hmm. Now people actually incorporating the companies embedding tokens into bylaws and so on. Last year total raised amount by like all ICOs combined was like 220 million. In July alone, I think it was somewhere around like 700 million.
Yes, so obviously there's a big increase in the number of ICOs. Where do you think that's all going?
As I explained, so any technology that is at least 10x more efficient than the previous generation replaces the previous generation. Mm-hmm. So blockchain has become the more convenient place to incorporate the company, to issue shares that exists in the internet in first place. And now it's like the default to go option to issue shares that you are going to sell to public. Mm-hmm. So I think all companies will.
So you think it's here to stay? So you don't think that there'll be sort of a saturation of the market of investors who are interested in investing through this means?
So because the demand for the ICO tokens are growing much faster, like far exceeds the supply, the companies that are currently doing ICOs are getting insane valuations that doesn't make sense in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. Just because people don't have anything else to invest in. And I expect some wave of disappointment somewhere between 6 to 12 months from now, when people will realize that most of the ICO tokens that they have bought are not really different from shares of a typical tech startup with 95% probability of failure. It's not every ICO is the next Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's just the shares of companies that are trying to be big, but so there is a hype on the market currently. There is a bubble there that is very similar to like 99.com bubble, where people were expecting that anything with the .com domain name will become a next billion-dollar company. Doesn't mean that all of the ICOs are not going to deliver. So Amazon and Google were incorporated in like early 90s. They were among those .coms. Yeah, just a matter of finding the right one. Mm-hmm. So some of these ICOs are actually going to be highly profitable, the returns from them, but most of them will not.
Right. Well, and what about trading these securities? I mean, so I think people are so focused right now on the ICO itself, right? It's the process of actually issuing these tokens for the first time, like an IPO, right? And getting some money into the company, and then it's like, well, it doesn't matter, then I have this money. But what happens? Then you have all these different tokens, and the reason people are buying them is they think they're actually tradable, and for them to be tradable, there needs to be a market and an exchange. And by market, I mean there need to be people who actually want to buy them, and an exchange is a place where legally they can trade them. So tell me a little bit about that.
It became an industry of its own. There are a lot of funds that make profits on speculation of blockchain-based tokens. They buy at the right time, sell at the right time, make 10% of profits, they're happy. So there are a lot of people who make money on speculation in the cryptocurrency exchanges.
That doesn't sound like a good thing, actually.
No, it's also happening in the conventional market.
Sure. But you need actual...
A lot of funds are investing in the pre-IPO companies with the only goal to sell during the IPO with like 10% margin.
Right, but so for the stability of these markets, you actually need people who want to buy in the secondary market, not because they're speculators, but because they actually want to buy.
So the secondary markets consist not only of speculators, as I explained earlier. There are a flow of new investors coming in who are looking for something interesting to invest in, and it happens that cryptocurrency exchanges have much more to offer than brokerage companies, and there are much more like failing banks and fraudulent brokerage companies in like every country than failed cryptocurrency exchanges.
Well,
Totally.
cryptocurrency exchanges haven't been around long enough to be failing yet.
Well, there are like at least a dozen of bank failures per year per country, and I can name only maybe one cryptocurrency exchange that fails per country per year at most.
Okay.
So yes, they are on the next level of transparency, I'd say, because they are IT companies. They exist in internet in the first place. They are much closer to their consumers, and blockchain brings transparency to the next level by design.
So in, let's say, 5 years, right? I mean, this is not necessarily going to have a very, we don't have to look that far into the future. So in 5 years, by that time, there have been, hundreds, maybe thousands of companies that have done ICOs, all kinds of tokens. Tens of thousands. All kinds of tokens floating around. How many exchanges are there going to be at the same time that are, trading these? Because right now, I mean, if you think about kind of conventional markets, right, there's like the New York Stock Exchange, and there's the like Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and the London Stock Exchange. I mean, there are a number of exchanges, but ultimately not that many, not that many big ones, right?
Yeah. So I think the power structure will remain the same. Will stay the same.
You'll have.
Yeah. So that there is at least one stock exchange in every country, but if nothing is going on in the economy, it also doesn't make. If people don't have money, it also doesn't make sense to start even a cryptocurrency exchange in that country. Although it's like 100 times cheaper now, so most likely each country will have its own cryptocurrency exchange.
But right now, I understand you guys are starting. You have your own cryptocurrency exchange, and then I'm assuming a number of other companies that are doing what you're doing. They're doing their own cryptocurrency exchanges as well, right?
Yeah.
So basically, every company in the space is kind of working towards a cryptocurrency exchange.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
No, it's not easy. So not everyone wants to do it.
Okay.
But yeah, there will be a lot of them because the cost of starting exchanges, the cryptocurrency exchange, is much cheaper than starting a stock exchange. It's basically a website with some blockchain nodes on the background. On the back end.
Well, but then a specific, let's say we're talking about back to my Uber on the blockchain, right? So I've done an initial coin offering. We have these Uber tokens, and they, in order for them to be tradable on your exchange, they have to be listed on your exchange, right? They're not automatically going to be tradable on every exchange out there. You have to go to specific exchanges and register it with each exchange.
Not exactly, no. So most of the tokens that are issued in public blockchain, like Ethereum or Waves or whatever it is, can be listed by exchanges without having to have any approval from the issuer, because the protocol is designed in such a way.
Okay. So
it is possible to do smart contracts and tokens that cannot be listed without the approval of the issuer.
Okay.
We have this in works. It's not live yet anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so what you're saying is you can have an exchange and have basically every kind of token trading there, other than the ones that have specified that they don't want to be traded without their consent.
No, even if the token issuer specifies that he don't want his token to be traded on certain exchange, if it's a ERC20 token, there is no way for him to prevent the token from getting listed.
Okay. So I mean, I guess that's helpful. So you're basically saying you can have a number of exchanges. It's not limiting. It's not limiting this free exchange or free sale of tokens, because there's not a barrier to entry of a token onto a particular exchange. Mm-hmm. Okay. So no, this is really helpful. Now I'm sure our viewers and viewers on Facebook as well. Wow, there are a lot of people. they're wondering, so how much would it cost to do something like this? So you said initially, well, it's not going to cost $10,000.
Depends on...
I'm sure it depends on a lot of factors.
How much you can do in-house. It can range from like all in-house, then you don't pay anything to any external subcontractors. Then
are you talking about the technical part? Or
no, everything. So each
everything?
ICO requires a technical part, legal part, marketing, and a fair bit of project management.
Well, let's assume you don't have anything in-house. You're just, we're going back to our example, we have a startup, we have an idea, we have a technical team to implement the specific idea, but not a technical team to implement tokens, not a legal team to do all the legal stuff, not a marketing team to figure out what to get these investors.
The current range of market prices of agencies like ours, it ranges between from 50 to 400K.
That's for the full
for
offering?
Everything, yeah.
Okay. But it's, from my understanding, there's kind of a structure of you do an initial deposit and then there's like a success fee, right? Is that...
Yeah, there are a lot of ways it can be structured.
Okay. So I think what Andrey is trying to say is if you're interested in the specifics, you need to reach out to him directly and he will tell you. And he's not ready to broadcast it on Facebook and in our blog.
It evolves all the time. There are a lot of legal nuances. So
yes, there are. Okay.
So all the government registries, like right registries, driver license registrations, real estate, some land ownership, identity,
actually,
marriage certificates, it's all gonna be moved to the blockchain.
You say that with certainty, but I have to wonder, okay, I mean, governments they're kind of proprietary about stuff, right? Like, this is our stuff. And we sort of, the red tape and the bureaucracy, we don't like it, it's a necessary evil, but we're sort of comfortable with that and it prevents people from accessing our information.
Well, the government
decentralized must be scary for them, right?
I wouldn't focus on decentralized aspect of it.
Well, isn't that a given though?
It's not the primary one. So the main cost benefit comes from digitizing what is currently done on paper. For example, to buy real estate currently, in most of the countries you have to go through like 3 to 5 institutions, and if it's impossible without traveling there in person and running errand around all the government offices. If government allows digital signatures to be used for this process, it all can be done online. And
so when you say it's going to be on the blockchain, are you just talking about digital signatures, or actually the
blockchain
transaction being entirely on the blockchain?
Blockchain is becoming a good enough excuse to finally move all the bureaucracy to the digital signatures.
Okay. Well, because, I mean, there are different levels, right? Like, one is just the signature itself versus, like, the entire transaction is on the blockchain, and then what if it's hacked, right? Like, somebody goes in and hacks...
well, there is a recovery scenario from each for each disaster.
Okay. Because you obviously wouldn't want somebody to, like, steal, like, an entire city or something worth of real estate.
Blockchain provides full history of transactions since the beginning. It's stored on tens of thousands of computers all around the world. For registries, it actually makes sense from security standpoint, because during some revolutions in countries that happen time to time, the tax document registries and real estate registries are often getting burned, and if they are on the blockchain, it's impossible.
Okay, so interesting. So the future of the blockchain is governments starting to use them much more heavily. We shall see that comes true. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me, speaking with our Facebook viewers.
Sure, you are
and our blog viewers as well. And we'll have your contact information under the post, and people can reach out to you directly.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who was listening.
Let's wave goodbye.
Good luck with your ICOs.